There's more nutrition information out there than ever before, making it hard to tell what's true and what's totally made up, which is why today I'm taking you through the top 10 nutrition myths so you're armed with better information for you, for your family, and for your nutrition clients. And make sure you hang around to myth number 10, where I debunk the one myth that completely ruled the nutrition coaching space and why understanding it may save your health and fitness results. Let's start at the top. Myth number 10, eating carbohydrates makes you fat. There's a metabolic process in your body called de novo lipogenesis, which is essentially making new fat from either carbohydrate or amino acids. And although it can happen, it doesn't normally happen under normal conditions, which is an unfortunate truth for anyone that thinks that carbohydrates and their impact on hormones like insulin are the primary driver of fat gain. Remember, fat storage occurs when there are too many calories consumed versus what is being burned, with the majority of these excess calories being stored as fat. And your body is really smart. It would rather take the dietary fat and ingest to store that as fat, or stop releasing any more energy from fat to make up this difference. So eating carbohydrates in isolation does not make you fat, which makes this a myth. Okay, but here's what you do about it. Ideally, if you are looking to get leaner and to lose fat, keep your carbs or your client's carbs as high as possible while staying in a calorie deficit with adequate amount of protein and fat. Or if you don't particularly like eating carbohydrates, you can keep them lower, but this isn't the reason why you're going to lose weight. Which brings us to our next myth, because it is similar. Myth number 9, you gotta eat fat to lose fat. You ever heard this one? The low carb proponents, the ones that think that you need to eliminate all carbohydrates, they also say that in order to lose fat, you need to eat more fat. And that's just not true. Let's break that down. It turns out that eating fat doesn't actually increase the amount of fat your body burns, or the process that we call fat oxidation, which is fat burning. It doesn't increase this by a lot. But here's the deal. If you take away a lot of carbs from your diet, the absence of them will cause you to see a bigger change in the amount of fat that you burn. But this isn't because you ate more fat. It's because you took carbohydrates away. And at the end of the day, fat loss still occurs because of an imbalance in energy, not what you're burning as fuel. And here's what this means for you and your clients. It means that you don't need to pick and choose between dietary carbs and dietary fat. Eat dietary fat as part of a complete diet in balanced amounts, somewhere between 0.5 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, but this doesn't need to be consumed in the effort to burn more fat. Myth number 8, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Breakfast has long been championed the meal of all meals. And although when we study breakfast, which is the first meal upon waking up or breaking a fast, population-based research has shown that people that eat breakfast, they are healthier, but there's tons of confounding going on here, which means that people that eat breakfast, they might just have healthier nutrition habits to begin with. Here's what the evidence says about breakfast. When you wake up in the morning, this is when you are the most insulin sensitive. This isn't magic, it's because you're low on glycogen because you've been fasting overnight. A similar effect happens after exercise when your working muscles have used up a lot of glucose. So breakfast, after you've been fasting, is an ideal time to eat something because you'll process the energy more effectively, and it's smart to include some carbohydrate. So what does this mean for breakfast for you or your clients? Keep in mind this insulin sensitivity, it'll persist past the morning time, pending you don't eat anything and you keep fasting, which is why fasting has become so popular. The breakfast meal is really just breaking the fast anyway. Now, many people would benefit from eating whole, unprocessed foods upon waking. But the important part here is that you don't need to eat breakfast, especially if you are eating more for the rest of the day, and maybe even if you don't like eating breakfast. The important thing is that you're controlling for the big picture variables like total calorie intake and macronutrients. Now, here's one myth I believed for a long time. Speaking of macronutrients, you may have heard that you can only process so much protein per meal. So let's dive into that with myth number 7, which is don't eat more than 30 grams of protein per meal. Okay, so here's the truth around this one, and this is a little bit of a protein metabolism lesson. So when we eat protein, we break it down into amino acids. We then absorb these amino acids, and they're sent to do different things all over our bodies. Build new tissues, synthesize hormones, and even burn some as energy. Now, the process of absorbing protein does take a long time, and this is dependent on the source, but some of the quickest digesting and absorbing protein is whey protein, and that's going to be absorbed at around 10 grams per hour. Now, for many of you and your clients that are concerned with building new muscle, you know protein is important. The process of building new muscle or skeletal muscle is something called muscle protein synthesis. Now, what research on muscle protein synthesis shows is that this process peaks when you eat around 20 grams of protein per sitting. After this 20 gram mark, you start to see diminishing returns on its impact on muscle protein synthesis. The rest of the amino acids are going to be oxidized as energy, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean that the extra protein is wasted, because looking at just muscle protein synthesis as the indicator of how much protein you should be eating is misguided. Building new muscle is just one of the roles of amino acids. It does much more than that. But the myth that you should only eat 30 grams of protein per sitting because you're only going to utilize that much was probably born out of this thinking. What this new information means for you and for your clients is that hitting a daily protein total, we're talking about grams of protein consumed over the course of the day, is much more important than what you do in specific meals or sittings. For most people, this means focusing on hitting anywhere between 1.5 to 3.0 grams per kilogram of protein per day as a daily total, because this is going to be much more important than what you utilize at an individual meal. But that also doesn't mean that doesn't matter at all. It's still a good idea to split up your protein intake accordingly, somewhere between 0.3 to 0.5 grams per kilogram per meal, which will be optimal for muscle protein synthesis and also make it easier to hit your daily protein total. Speaking of eating, have you ever heard of what happens when you don't eat enough? Specifically, the process of starvation mode. Let's dive into that. With myth number 6, not eating enough food or calories sends the body into starvation mode. Okay, so the premise around this myth here is that if you don't eat enough calories, your body's gonna go into something called starvation mode, which is essentially your body sensing that not enough calories are coming in, and it's gonna decrease the amount of energy it burns, with some thinking that this could actually lead to weight gain. But this doesn't really work like that. Yes, there are metabolic adaptations to diet, but generally this only happens in an extended calorie deficit where someone loses a significant amount of weight. And even then, the impact on their basal metabolic rate, which is gonna be the part of your metabolism that just runs your daily processes, is only going to be impacted by around 10%. So for someone that has a BMR like myself, I have around 1,800 calories. If I lose a significant amount of weight over time, my BMR is only going to decrease. So for someone like myself with a BMR of around 1,800 calories, if I diet for an extended period of time, lose a bunch of weight, my BMR is only going to decrease by around 10%. 180 calories less. It's not a huge deal. And this also increases over time once I go back to maintenance calories. So here's the deal for you or your clients. This process of starvation mode, it really doesn't happen to a significant extent. And it's definitely not the reason why people are overweight. But for some people that are chronically dieting, very low calories over significant periods of time can impact portions of their metabolism, specifically in areas like spontaneous physical activity. We're talking fidgeting and toe tapping. Your body is pretty smart. If you don't eat a lot of energy, your body will sense this, and it will start to decrease the spontaneous physical activity or NEAT that you normally would do. To counteract all of this, to reduce the impact on your metabolism, you're going to want to lose weight slower, somewhere around the rate of 0.5 to 1% body weight per week, and eat as much as you can while making this happen. Now, at some point, salt got a bad rap, so let's dive into that. Myth number 5, limit sodium for optimal health. Sodium is a mineral that plays an important role in our bodies. It helps control water balance and our blood pressure, which obviously becomes important for someone dealing with high blood pressure or even low blood pressure. And this is probably where the idea stemmed from, that if you want to be healthy, you should limit sodium. But this suggestion doesn't apply for everyone, particularly people that are already healthy and active. And if anything, it might actually be impacting vitality and performance, especially if the majority of your calories are coming from fresh, unprocessed food. If you're eating this way and active and sweating a lot and drinking a lot of water, you actually might need more salt. Now, what this means is that for many healthy populations, limiting sodium to less than 2,300 milligrams per day has not been shown to lessen the incidence of death from things like heart disease or stroke. So if you're active and already eat a nutrient-rich diet, you probably need to eat more sodium, closer to 2,300 milligrams to 5,000 milligrams per day, especially if you sweat a lot. If performance is impacted, this could be sodium related, so make sure to rehydrate with this mineral. Now here's one of my favorite myths because it had a huge impact on my own nutrition. Not as much as the last myth we'll discuss, but still a pretty big impact. And that's myth number 4, you must eat healthy to lose weight. For some reason, at some point, fat loss turned into a morality contest. Almost like there's some little angel and some little devil sitting on your shoulders, judging what food is good and what food is bad and deciding if you'll gain weight or lose weight. But our bodies don't really treat food this way. For many, as we discussed already today, to lose weight, we need to control for calories. calories. Now, quote unquote healthy food is typically lower in calories. It is typically higher in nutrients and higher in volume, but you can still gain weight eating these foods if you're in a calorie surplus. And if anything, dieting on only these foods can be problematic for a lot of people, specifically if they start to view everything else as bad. Now, here's what to do about this, especially if you or your clients are trying to lose weight. There is no such thing as a good or bad food, just better or worse choices in the context of our goals. Work in treat foods into your plan and into your goals, and you'll find that you're just as successful because it's easier to stick to things. When you're too overly restrictive about this stuff, it does make it harder to stick to. Now let's move to myth number 3 here. This is a bit of a curveball. Eating organic is healthier for you. When we compare the nutritional content of organic food versus conventional food, there isn't a huge difference here. In most cases, it isn't significant. And for most people, just aiming to eat more unprocessed foods, both organic and conventional, are a better use of energy for your health. Keep in mind, just because something is natural does not equal better or safer. What this means is that if you have the means to buy organic and you enjoy eating that way, by all means go for it. But for many, this won't be the deal breaker on improving health. Personally, I encourage clients to buy local meat and produce when possible, because that's going to have similar impacts on their health, and it's probably better for the environment and local economy anyway. And that's myth number 2. You can't gain muscle in a calorie deficit. For the longest time, the goal is losing fat and gaining muscle. They were completely different things, almost like two sides of a coin. And you wouldn't mix them, because if you wanted to lose fat, you needed to be in a calorie deficit, less calories coming in than you're burning. And to gain muscle, you needed to be in a calorie surplus. This led many people to focus on bulking and cutting cycles, where you'd focus on one or the other for extended periods of time. And in many cases, this went too far in either direction. You'd be cutting and you'd lose tons of weight, but also quite a bit of muscle, or gaining muscle, but you'd also be gaining quite a bit of fat. Neither situation is really ideal, and new and emerging evidence has dispelled this a bit. It has been shown that you can build muscle while in a calorie deficit, but it is more challenging than gaining muscle in a calorie surplus. Instead of thinking of your body being in a calorie surplus or a calorie deficit, think of it this way: you are always in calorie balance. But if you take in less energy, your body will access more energy to make up this balance. But if you eat less energy, your body will access more from your body stores. And if you eat more energy, your body will store more. So if you eat more energy and hang out around energy maintenance, or even in a slight deficit with the right stimulus from exercise, your body can actually build a little bit of muscle, albeit slower, and make up the difference from body fat. And for many people, staying away from excessive bulking and cutting cycles is probably smart. Slow and steady in either direction is the key, and both of these things can happen concurrently. This last myth, this is the one that changed everything for me. Myth number 1, eat small, frequent meals to boost the metabolism. Here's the deal: every time you eat food, your metabolism increases. This is called the thermic effect of food, or TEF, which is the increase to your metabolism due to eating. This is the boost to your metabolism or energy expenditure because you're breaking down and absorbing food. But this increase is due to the amount of calories in a meal, not the frequency. So what it looks like is this. Let's say we have 2 diets matched at 1800 calories and 1800 calories. If we split this up at 3 meals at 600 calories over here and 6 meals at 300 calories over here, you would see that over here, every time you ate, you would have a bigger blip in the increase in your metabolism for 3 times. But over here, you'd have 6 increases in your metabolism, but the area under the curve for these will be proportional to the ones over here. It doesn't matter that there's 6 bumps over here and 3 bumps over here. What matters is that the increase is due to the amount of calories, not the frequency. And here's what this means for you, is that you are liberated from carrying Tupperware everywhere and setting your alarm clock for every 3 hours for when you need to eat again, all because you need to stoke the metabolic fire. Size and frequency of meals should be based on personal preference, and for most this means aiming for around 3 to 5 meals per day, or 3 meals and 2 snacks, as well as spacing out your protein. Now, I hope you found some value in working through these nutritional myths, and what I hope you take away from this is the following. Boring nutrition advice is usually the correct advice, and if it's too good to be true or overly restrictive, or it demonizes one thing, then it's probably not true. Now, as great as all those tips are, if you're really serious about starting a nutrition coaching business, the next thing I'll have you do is check out this video I've linked up right here. There is tons of hype and uncertainty around the carnivore diet, so listen to my thoughts on it right here. So make sure to check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video.